Hi, this is Jenny Langley, author of the new Maudsley training manual. I just want to tell you a little bit more about the training for professionals that starts next month. There's 8 2-hour sessions. In the first session, it's very much an introduction to the model, some background to why we know that it's really, really useful to include families in the collaborative care programme within treatment for somebody with an eating disorder. That, it's clearly a really, really well-researched evidence-based model. It's also very flexible, so you can use it as a topical. You can do topical workshops with carers, so you might just do a workshop around the distress around mealtime, or you might do a workshop around the animal metaphors and carers' responses. You might do a module just around a session just around a kind of model for change, so understanding the cycle of change and techniques that carers can use to, first of all, reflect on their own responses to the eating disorder, and then how they can coach their loved ones when their loved ones are ready to make their own changes. So basically, your first session, very much an introduction, and one of the pieces of materials that you will have been sent is a facilitator training workbook. So thinking about facilitator style, the ethos of the model is that we want the workshops to be very experiential. So basically we're using the carer's own scenarios and introducing them to the techniques using those scenarios. So as facilitators, we're not portraying ourselves as experts, because obviously the families are experts in their own situation. So that's session 1, very much an introductory session. Session 2, we get down into the exercises that we use within the model. So within the training manual, there's 12 different modules. So again, you can either work through all the modules, or you can choose the ones which work for your group of carers. So not every group of carers are going to have the same needs, are they? So it is very flexible. Now, in the training, I'll be referring to the modules that I really, really want you to include whenever you do the workshops with the carers, the ones which are really, really kind of the foundation of the whole spirit of the model. So in that session 2, we just touch on some of the useful psychoeducation for carers. So there's some things that carers are quite surprised at, helping them to realise that it's not really what caused the eating disorder, because often we don't know. It's what's keeping it going. Are there any maintaining factors? And introducing the carers to those animal metaphors in terms of are they responding in a very protective way at the moment, or are they being very directive? If it's working, of course, carry on doing it. But if it's not working, consider what changes could they make to make it a better environment for their loved ones in their recovery journey. We also look at the importance of medical risks, so introducing the carers to some of the things that they might want to look out for in terms of when medical risk, physical medical risk is becoming very high, or maybe there's suicidal ideation. So just thinking a little bit about that, so carers know when to go to the emergency room or when to call the crisis line, that sort of thing. Then we're going to look at exercises to build empathy. So this is in the second session as well. So really helping the carers to step into the shoes of their loved one and see the world through that eating disorder lens. Then the carers are much, much better able to connect with their loved one and understand all of the challenges that their loved one is facing. So thinking about the eating disorder voices, thinking about the fear of failure, thinking about the incredible fear that certain foods are dangerous or they're going to make me fat, all that sort of thing. So we've got several exercises, visual exercises around empathy, which are really, really powerful. And then the other thing we're going to look at in session 2 is a model where we can help families to start to become more emotionally intelligent. So the eating disorder obviously creates lots of emotional dysregulation within the family. So first of all, carers will learn how to identify and validate their own emotions, and then they can use the same model to identify and help to validate the emotions of their loved ones. And then they can role model that it's okay to have all of these big emotions, and that it's possible to soothe yourself, and then help coach their loved ones that they can learn to self-soothe as well. So a lot going on in that session 2, but some really, really important exercises that we do with the carers. Session 3 is very much about the caring responses. So we go through each of the animal metaphors. So if being a kangaroo carer, if being protective is what you need to do at the moment, then you're not going to change. But if you find that you've become overprotective and your loved one is pushing back and telling you that you're not giving them enough responsibility, then that's when you start to think about changes. So we go through all of the different animal metaphors, and then as the next stage, we look at a questionnaire. So there's 33 questions on the accommodating and enabling scale. And it really, really helps carers to really think carefully about how much their life has changed and what things they're doing to maybe accommodate the eating disorder to keep the peace, which works to start with, but then thinking about maybe there's a possibility that we need to start to make some changes because actually we're all being controlled by the eating disorder voice. So we've got some lovely exercises to help carers to reflect on how they're responding to the eating disorder at the moment, and then think about how they can make changes. And at no point are we trying to make the carers feel that they've done anything wrong or make them feel guilty or make them feel ashamed, because they'll be feeling like that already. But we're really just saying there's no right or wrong answer, but this is just some of the ideas that we know have worked with other families in the past, that if they can slightly change their responses, then that can create a much smoother environment for recovery. In session 4, we really get into the nitty-gritty of the motivational language, which is so important within this model. So we think about the cycle of change, the trans-theoretical model of change. So at the very beginning, the young person with the eating disorder is likely to be in denial or pre-contemplation or anosognostic. So they really, really don't know that they're ill. They feel that they're being very healthy and they feel that everybody else around them maybe isn't healthy. Helping carers to understand that, and how that even when their loved one is in complete denial, they can use the motivational language to still connect with the healthy side of their loved one's brain. So we teach all of the motivational skills. So within this session, we'll be looking at the value of non-judgmental listening, so lots of reflections, lots of genuine affirmations, again, lots of attending to emotions, and then some of the more advanced techniques like developing discrepancy. So on the one hand, what the patient is doing now is not going to help them to get what they want in the future. So creating that little bit of tension that may stimulate thoughts of change. So really powerful techniques to help the young person to start to think about, okay, so there is a possibility of change, and my parents or my carers are really behind me. They really want to support me. They've got the same goal as me, which is to get back my quality of life. So we can illustrate in many, many different ways how the motivational language can work. And one of the things that the carers say is so useful when they have these carer skills workshops is that they learn a new language so that they can really, really start to re-inject some of that hope and optimism that has been crushed by the eating disorder voice so far. In session 5, we look at further examples of using the motivational language. So by the end of session 4 and session 5, you'll really have had lots and lots of illustrations of how the motivational language can work in practice. In session 6, we introduce a model for change. So it's a 5-step model for change. So step 1 is identifying behaviours that you might want to change. So we start with the model with the carers, and then we go on to the carers using the model with their loved ones when their loved ones are ready. So thinking about things that you might want to change, ranking them in order of difficulty, choosing one to dig deeper into, to explore more. Then how do we explore that behaviour? And then coming up with a menu of options. So if we decide that this is a behaviour that we want to move on from or adapt slightly, let's think up as many, many different options that we possibly can, and then choose one of those options and then take that into a behavioural experiment. So it's a really, really, by this time we can be quite logical. It's a really logical step-by-step model that carers can really, really easily understand. So first of all, we're encouraging the carers to use it for themselves in terms of making their own changes, and then they can use it with their loved ones at a later stage. So we look at examples of both in that session 6. In session 7, we'll look at some of the difficult scenarios. So when things get stuck, so we have this concept that the eating disorder is coexisting with success. So maybe you have a patient who has gained, a significant amount of weight. They've challenged their fear foods, but they're stuck. They're still well off the target weight that they need to be at, but they're able to go back to school or back to work or back to college. They're able to learn to drive. They're able to go out with their friends. So they're not really motivated to make those further final changes. So we look at that concept of when things seem stuck, what can carers best do to A, stop their loved ones going backwards in lapses and relapses, but also B, in terms of the patients, to kind of hold that young person in a safe place until they're ready to move on to the final stages of recovery. So we'll look at that kind of example. We'll look at the resistance that often comes with eating disorders. I'm not sick. I don't need help. leave me alone, it's you that's got the problem. So we'll think about that. We'll think about carers being able to hand additional responsibility over to their loved ones at an appropriate stage. So sometimes carers are so scared that it stops them handing back that responsibility, and that can be really, really frustrating for everybody. And then we'll think about also supporting adults who've maybe had eating disorders for a long time, so severe and enduring eating disorders, and helping carers to hold on to the hope for their loved ones that recovery is always possible, however many years they've been struggling. So we've got some lovely stories of recovery of people that have struggled for 15, 20, 25, even 30 years. So it doesn't mean that we're looking through somebody with a long-term eating disorder with rose-tinted spectacles, but it means we're holding on to the hope that things might possibly improve for them in the future. And I've had lots and lots of families in that situation who've said that the new Maudsley approach has really helped to re-energise them and really, really helped them to reconnect with their loved one and not just be worrying about the eating disorder all of the time. Okay, and then in session 8, we will look further at longer-term eating disorders. We'll look at the concept of lapses and relapses, relapse contingency planning, motivating carers to keep going when it seems like this is going on forever, and repairing ruptured relationships. So obviously eating disorders are very much illnesses of disconnection. So thinking about at every stage that the carers feel that they've got the wherewithal to reconnect with their loved one. And that might be through something really simple like writing a letter just to kind of reconnect, but writing a letter using the motivational skills that they've learned. And then sometimes with the longer term eating disorders, just accepting, okay, so it's not going to be that my loved one is going to get back to what we deem to be a healthy weight, but our loved one can lead her own best quality of life, or his own best quality of life, maybe in a much lower weight, or much more fragile, or still holding on to some of these eating disorder behaviours, but they can still lead a good quality of life within that. So that's the 8 sessions. So I've made a kind of a mini training manual. So it's been translated, all of it's been translated for you. So you've got that which we will work through in those 8 training sessions. There's also some really, really useful video vignettes, and they've been translated for you. So they really illustrate all of the skills as well. So there's a birthday party example, there's a supermarket shopping example, there's a meal support example, there's compulsive exercising example, there's a couple around siblings, so siblings talking to each other, but also siblings fighting because of the eating disorder, and many more. So you'll have all of these resources when you come and join in with the new Maudsley training. So I really hope that you're signing up for the training and that you will really, really enjoy the sessions, and that it will really, really have a significant impact on the work that you do with families. Thank you.